It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Wednesday, November 15th, and so happy for you joining us. We are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. Today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Health is Happiness, the Foundational Figures Word Study, and of course commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. Whew. All right, everyone, how are you doing? It is my second day over here in Seoul, just having a great time, met a lot of good friends, meeting some more good friends today too, so I'm looking forward to receiving grace, listening to people's testimonies and how they have survived 2023 so far. Don't forget, tomorrow is Q&A Thursday, so get those questions ready and send them to me whenever you can. If you haven't yet, for this podcast here, leave a like and comment to build our community. Just super happy for everyone joining us every weekday on the Morning Star Drive, so let's get up and support each other each and every day. So this week's Sunday message title, two titles, Research God or Study God, and the second title is One can't stand to see something that is not beautiful because it is unpleasant to look at. All right, guys, it is Wednesday already. It is hump day, the middle of the week, but on top of that, it's the 15th, guys, and that means we are halfway through the month of November. Yes, we are halfway through, which means in 2 weeks, we will reach December. This is nuts, guys, that we are moving this fast to end this year. I am actually getting really excited about the end of this year. Right? Only because, not only, but, part of it we can say that we survived 2023. And of course, those who survive until the end of 2023 will be blessed. So there's one big thing there. But also, this week's message was quite powerful when it talked about studying God, right? And then when you study God properly or when you know God deeply, you will know the deep secrets and you will know about the judgment. You'll know about what is going to happen in 2023. So for me, I was just like, wow, there's a lot of things that we can realize by studying the Word, by studying God, looking at nature, like a bunch of different things we can do. But to get the deep secrets, to know about judgment, to know about what's going to happen in 2023, this is all having to do with studying God. And I hope it's something that's kind of piqued everyone's interest because I think everyone's interested in what's going to happen this year. Now, for me, I've talked to a lot of people, and there's speculation. So no one really knows exactly what's going to happen, but there's a bunch of topics that come out, and even the world and Christianity talking about what's going to happen this year. For instance, there's war breaking out in North and South Korea. Some people say nuclear war or World War III is going to happen, collapse of the American economy, Israel being destroyed, China taking over Taiwan. There's a bunch of stuff that everyone is talking about, saying that this is going to be what's going to happen in 2023. And this is not just coming from Christians, not just coming from Providence, coming from the world too. And I think for us to be very grounded, and for us to understand exactly what's going to happen, we always need to go back to the biblical principles that we've learned through the 30 Bible studies that we do, right? A couple of them, number one is, it's quite funny because I'll have someone who's no longer in Providence, but they forgot about the principle. So they're like, oh, do you think the world's going to end? And I'm in my head, I'm like, we learned this in the End Times Bible study. The world's never going to end. Right? It's not going to all of a sudden just be destroyed. The world says there's going to be some nuclear catastrophe and everyone's going to die. It's not going to happen. End times, the world will never be destroyed in that way. Right? Remember, when it comes to the end times, God is about ending wickedness. God is about bringing salvation to the world. So we don't have to worry about that type of thing where the world is going to end. Right? So there's one thing as people being in this history, because we have knowledge, because we know, because we study, we're not worried about the same things the world is worried about. Right? Now, when it comes to wars, that's a different story. Is a war going to happen? Well, we've already got a war happening between Russia and the Ukraine, right? And then now there's, we have a big, it's escalating very quickly with Palestine and Israel. But we also know that war is one of the things that Sunseem hates so much because he's experienced it himself. But one thing when it comes to war, the message also tells us, like we also know that the word is telling us that war cannot break out without God's permission, right? So the question could come up to us is, when would God give permission for war to happen, right? And usually it's when there's some type of judgment. And I would say it's not far-fetched to say that war can break out because look at the spiritual situation we're in right now, right? Look at what is happening when people using their responsibilities to go against the man of mission. So that's why I say war is very, very possible. Like the big wars. Like I don't think Israel-Palestine is considered a big war. It's been an ongoing war. War is Russia-Ukraine. And then I would say the big wars would either be North and South Korea, China-Taiwan, and North Korea, China, Taiwan, and there's one more I was talking about. North Korea, China, Taiwan. Is there another big one? Well, maybe those two are the big ones that I think that is very, very possible. And since, Sunseem is, what's happening to Sunseem is happening in Korea, I wouldn't be surprised if it was North and South Korea. I just wouldn't be, right? So that is something quite interesting. And regardless of whatever happens, if it's China, Taiwan, or if it's North Korea, South Korea, no matter what, the U.S. will be involved. And then if it's North Korea, then China and Russia is involved. If it's China, Taiwan, then Russia and China are involved. So we see that these big superpowers are going to be involved. It seems almost no matter what, right? So that's quite interesting there too. Another big principle that we need to know is repeating history. Repeating history is quite interesting. Repeating history is... we know this principle that if we want to know the future, one of the best ways to look at the future is to look at the past. What happened? Like, for instance, we have to kind of parallel ourselves to what happened 2,000 years ago at Jesus's time, right? So, some people, I know that some people, when this all happened, they're all wondering like, oh, I thought Sunseem's not going to go on the cross anymore, and Sunseem's not going to do this, and then all of a sudden we have more tribulation, but then we fulfilled the rapture. Why is this stuff still going on, right? So if I were to give like an exact parallel, look at the time of Jesus. Jesus died and resurrected. And remember, guys, the resurrection is the quintessential, most important celebrated moment in Christian history, right? So after Jesus resurrected, which is the singular greatest thing that happened in history, what happened? Well, you're still looking at another 300 years of persecution. There was still tribulation happening, right? Christians were being killed, right? Which was even worse in Jesus' time, because at Jesus' time, it was only Jesus. But after that, you had Christians being rounded up and killed, right? So when you look at the resurrection was the biggest point in the New Testament history, right? Because that brought salvation. You can parallel that to what was the cross? The cross was at the time where rapture was fulfilled, right? So you'll have to look at the resurrection of Jesus and the rapture being fulfilled as the two big moments. So even after Jesus resurrected, there was still persecution, still tribulation. Even after the rapture, there's still these things going on. It's no longer something to do with the cross, because the cross was, for Jesus was the single most thing that brought salvation to all mankind. And the rapture is that big thing that is the same thing there, but still persecution, difficulty, tribulations, hardships all happened after that too, right? The biggest difference would be what? The biggest difference would be what the disciples, how the disciples what they could actually handle. How much tribulation could they handle? And it was after receiving the Holy Spirit. So even though there was more difficulty even after Jesus' resurrection, as the disciples became stronger and stronger, received the Holy Spirit, got conviction of this history, even though it came, they grew, they multiplied and grew so much. Right? So in this time period also, I don't think that everything is going to magically become better in 2024, right? I still think we're going to have we're going to have two more trials, right? Two more trials during that time, the appeal and the Supreme Court. But I think what's going to happen is our capability of handling these things, right? Just like at 2023, all of us on this podcast, everyone who's been listening, we are now handling things much better than we did before. Like, remember March? We're handling it much better right now, aren't we? Right? When we hear these crazy news, people are not freaking out, but people will text me and say, hey, what do you think about this? It's very, very reasonable and it's very calming, right? And I think that because we're going through this experience right now, it enables us to handle the bigger difficulties that come in the future better, right? So that's something that I do think is, yeah, there's still going to be tribulation and it might be even more difficult for us. However, we will, through each experience, we grow. Through each experience, we become that much better. And I think that's going to be a big thing that all of us have to realize is, yeah, we're getting stronger from all these things too. Another big principle I do think that we have to look at is, in order for us to know the future too, I think we need to realize about the principle of gradual history, right? And even with Christianity, with all that tribulation, persecution that happened in the first 400 years with the early Christian church, look at Christianity now. What actually happened was there was an exponential growth. The further we go in, there's exponential growth, right? So looking at our history, we are 100% going to get better with time. We're going to grow exponentially in the future. It's going to be slow in the beginning, but it's going to be powerful and fast in the future, right? And this is not a theory. If we understand this, this is reality. So I don't think there's much we should worry about. Right? I don't worry so much about what's going to happen in Providence too. And I think that's something that we really have to kind of engage our mind into. Because sometimes we just get worried. Oh no, like remember when it happened in March? Wow, all the stuff happened with KJS, stuff like this. We're going to be like, what the heck? Like what's going to happen to Providence? But as things settle down, we realize, no. This is not going to break Providence. No single person, well, besides Sunstein, right? But we're not worried about Sunstein. But no single human being is like here, like KJS, is not going to break Providence. There's not, it's like what Sunstein says. When you're not worried, you're not anxious, right? And I would have to say there is not much to really, really worry about. Okay, and actually, remember I told you that I met someone who's been out of Providence for about 10 years and stuff, just a good friend of mine, right? And one thing that was quite shocking to me was when this person was talking to me, they were talking to me like almost like everyone left Providence. That's how they were talking to me, like, oh my gosh, and this, oh, and these people left, and these people left. I was like, okay, but interesting. This was the interesting part. They had like this doomsday way of talking to me, like, oh my gosh, and this, and this, and this. But when I told them that, that's actually, it just happened in Whitestone. Other churches weren't as affected as Whitestone. This person was shocked. Because this person used to be in Whitestone, so they have contacts in Whitestone. They know a bunch of people that left Whitestone. But when I told them that the majority, like the vast majority of people are still in Providence, they were shocked because they were like, just the way that they're like, everything that they heard, it was just only based on Whitestone alone. So they're like, oh, really? Everyone's okay? I was like, yeah, the vast majority is fine. Like I would say the exact same thing, like the churches that were hit the hardest in like Canada, America, they were affected, but the other churches weren't affected as much, right? And this reminded me of like, it really matters who you listen to, like, or what you're listening to. Like if you look at the media right now too, look at the media and let's just say America. The media is going to only show crazy stuff about people dying from guns or like mass shootings. And then the world looks at America and they think like, oh my gosh, there's a gun problem and America has shootings everywhere all the time. And the answer is no. It's not like that. It's totally not like that. Like I've been to every country and I used to live in America too. I visit America also in Canada, all these are different places. If you only look at those news articles, you may think that America is basically everyone shooting each other. But it's not like that. It's kind of every country is the same. There are places where you don't want to go, where all the violence is, and then there's places that are absolutely safe. The way people talk is like 50% of America is like shooting each other with guns. But the real answer is like when you look at like the vast majority of gun problems, It's in the inner city. It's all inner city. It's urban. It's inner city in the bad areas. That's where it's all happening, right? So when we only see what we see, then we kind of attribute it to everything. And it's not a very good way to see things, because you're going to start to stereotype or have a perspective that is wrong. So think about this. If really America is all about guns and shooting each other, it's the most dangerous place on earth, which it's not. Think about this. Why would America still, year in and year out, be the number one country where people immigrate to? They are by far, people immigrate to America more than any other country. If it's really that dangerous, it's not, right? A lot of it is stereotypes. A lot of it is discrimination. A lot of it is like just people, like the news just pointing out those things only, making it seem like it is like catastrophe, like we're all dying. And the answer is it is not. So, I've traveled to many countries. Most countries are the same. The places that, you go to a city, there's really, really bad places and there's really good places. Just avoid the bad places and you're going to be fine like 90% of the time, right? And that's something that we have to also think about too, is we can't look at just one thing and say, oh my gosh, we're all dying. And the answer is no, we're not. Yeah, there could be something out there that's like, wait, this is really bad. Oh, someone seems guilty. Like, it can't be like that. That becomes very irrational and very, very irrational, very unreasonable way of thinking, right? Actually, this brings me to this other thing that I was thinking about yesterday, because I remember I had a very, very good conversation with that person who left Providence a long time ago, and the conversation was really good because as I'm talking to this person, very calmly, very reasonably and rationally, because that's what I try to be, I began to understand myself. I could see myself better. I can see who I am and I can see my faith better. What does that mean? Like understanding myself and my faith, I was like, oh, this is what I'm kind of like. So I started to think about my reasoning and my rationale for why I believe in this history and how I know that Sunsim is innocent. Like, where does that come from? And I found that I had two parts about me that were working together. And this is something that only people of faith will really, really understand, right? So what are the two parts? The first part is being reasonable, rational. Like that's the one I really want to be. But the second part has to do with my faith. And these two things come together to allow me to realize or to believe a certain way. So let's start out with the first part. The first part is, trying to be reasonable and rational, right? I don't like to emotionally react to rumors or even facts, right? Even when facts come out, I don't want to assume why this thing happened. I want to let it play out so I can know exactly why, right? I can't assume that I know the full situation without any context, right? So even if I hear facts like really, really bad news, oh, this happened or whatever it is, even if it's true, but I need to wait it out a bit to know the context and the reasoning behind it, or else I end up making my own assumptions on a fact, right? It's like this. It's like, you guys ever been mad at someone for for doing something really bad, but then later you hear that that their parents just divorced or someone just died close to them, or, even something as bad as being abused as a child. Like, when you hear about these things, when someone does something wrong, even though you know it's wrong, and it is wrong to do, however, even though it's wrong, you sit there and when you hear the reason why they were like that, you begin to understand the person better and you even let it go. And instead of trying to reprimand them, you're trying to help them instead. Right? And there's so many circumstances where this has happened in our lives. And that's why for me, I try my best to be reasonable and rational. I try my best. But I also know that just being reasonable and rational is not enough. It's just not enough. Right? So the second thing I have to think about is my decision and the way that I think. My second part has to do with my faith. And this faith is a huge part of my belief in this history and belief in Sunsim too, right? And this is something that worldly people they can't understand it. And, because worldly people just think like, oh, you're just brainwashed, or you're naive. Oh, you don't know what's actually going on. Like, that's what they say because that comes from the worldly perspective. But when it comes to faith, remember, faith is not blind, right? Blind is if you don't know blind is basically you didn't listen to the word. You haven't seen evidence of miracles. You haven't seen God answer your prayers, and you just believe. That's blind. But if you had miracles in your life, if your character has changed, if you've had God answer your prayers, if you had all these things happen to you, that's not blind. It is proof that it's real. And you're like, oh, this is why I believe, right? And because we have this proof, the evidence, right? So what is the evidence to me? For me, number one is because I came from the former faith, the word was enough. The word was the greatest sign. I was like, this is incredible. Right? And then on top of the word, the God answering my prayers, miracles that have happened in my life, me changing my character. These are all things that I look at like, wow, this is truly the history of God. Receiving the Holy Spirit, right? Being able to heal people, right? Just a lot of these things come out and, it becomes proof to me that this is the history of God. And once I know and believe that this is the history of God, and then I receive the Holy Spirit and I have conviction in this history, it is impossible for any of these accusations to be true. Right? Not because I'm blind, but because I have enough to have faith in this history. I have enough. I've seen enough. I've heard enough. I felt enough. Right? And I know that in my heart, for this mission that Sunsteam has right now, God would not choose someone like this who would do something that terrible for this mission. The word would stop, right? He would have been judged. So many different things, right? And when I think about it, only people of faith could understand what I'm saying, right? So even if you look at the former faith is very similar. Do you think anyone from the former faith will stop them from believing in Jesus? And the answer is no way, because they have enough evidence. They have heard the gospel. They have realized the truth. They have received the Holy Spirit, that it is enough to, if anyone says anything bad about Jesus, there's no way that they would go against Jesus. Their faith is solidified. It's not blind. They believe. They've received enough. And their belief has been proven true in their life, right? And as they preach the gospel to others also, they can't turn back from it. So when people have faith, people of faith will understand what we're going through too, right? Like I say, it's not blind. We have received enough proof, enough evidence, the Holy Spirit, right? It's impossible for me to go against conscience, against the man of mission. And, after having this talk with my this friend, in my head, I'm like, yeah, you know what? You can't just go by reason alone. Just reasoning and rational alone is not enough. So let's just say that if we're gonna look at Sunsteam only with reason and rationale, right? Only that. Why is it not enough? Because reasoning alone tells us that, reasonably there is not enough evidence to say Sunsteam is guilty. There's not enough, right? However, reasoning will also tell us that there is also still a chance that it's true. Just because you don't have all the evidence doesn't mean it's not true either. And that will leave doubt in our hearts, right? And that is something where it's like, yeah, that makes sense. If it's just reasoning alone, you can still have doubt. If it's just reasoning alone, it just means you're stuck in the middle, right? You haven't seen enough to say it's true, but you still can't 100% say that it's not, right? So when it comes to just reasoning, it's not enough. When it comes to the one that God has sent with the current mission, reasoning alone is not enough. Just being rational is not enough. It must be coupled with your proven faith, right? Not blind, proven. The evidence of the word, the evidence of God answering our prayers, the evidence of seeing all the crazy, amazing things that happen inside Providence. It reminds me of like James chapter 2, verse 26. The body without the spirit is dead, just as faith without deeds. And we need both, right? It's not enough just to have reason and rationale alone. It's not just enough to have faith alone. You need both working together. The physical and the spiritual have to come together in order for existence to happen properly, in order to make it perfect. So yeah, it was really interesting, right? That through my talking with this person, I'm able to kind of look at myself and say, this is kind of where this is how I think, right? To look at myself and just kind of break it down to understand who I really am. So I thought that was quite interesting too. And that's something I was like, that's kind of cool that I can kind of see who I am, right? And how I really think. So I'm not sure about you guys, but that's kind of what, while talking to this person, I was able to break down my thoughts, right? I was really, really able to do that. Now, here's something that's quite interesting too, because when I was talking to the cheer guy, you remember the cheer guy, Hyomyoung? I told you I met him the other day. One thing that I found quite interesting is this. We were talking, and he's like going, you know what? Like he told me, I was telling him, like, I gotta really figure out what I'm gonna do next. And he's like, you should. The funny thing is, he's like, you should suffer. And I was like, what? In my head, I was like, what the heck? He's like, no. He's like, without suffering, you cannot reach the next level. And that is absolute truth. Right? So I sat there in my head like, how comfortable do I want to be? How comfortable do I really want to be? And it was like, without suffering, right? Without suffering, you will not reach the next level. And that kind of it kind of clicked something in my head. Because, as a human being, one of the things we do try to avoid is suffering. Like we really try to avoid suffering as much as possible. But then also we realize that without suffering, we cannot raise our level. So if I just try to get comfortable, it means that I don't want to deal with my problems right now. And if I don't deal with my problems right now, what's going to happen? Then everything that's at this level of a problem, I will never overcome. And yes, of course, we need a break here and then. But when he said that to me, it was quite interesting it's so paradoxical. You know what I mean? It's like, we don't want to suffer, but if we want to grow, we got to suffer. I was like, It's quite, it's such a big dilemma in our hearts, knowing that we need to suffer to grow, yet we don't want to suffer. It's so interesting. And we need to suffer until we die type of thing too. So it was quite like when he said that, I was like, it's kind of weird in the beginning, like you got to suffer. I'm just like, huh? And I was like, but it makes sense. It really, really makes sense. And that's something I want to kind of dive more deeper into, especially right now, because my trip in Korea is coming to an end. I have less than a week left. I have 6 days left before I leave for Taiwan, which means my time here is super limited. One more day in Seoul, and then I head back to the Wonwon area. Then I'm going to Taiwan, which is super fast. And the crazier part is I haven't even bought my next ticket yet out of Taiwan. I only have a one-way ticket to Taiwan. I don't have my next ticket. I'm not even sure where I'm going to be in December. But it's interesting because it's almost like God telling me through my physical situation right now, it symbolizes my path too at the moment is it's just uncertain. I'm not sure what my mission is going to be. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I'm not sure what I will do for my next mission. But it's interesting to see what God has in store for me for 2023, right? So that was something I was just like, that's really, really interesting. Really interesting like this. I was like, I really hope that everything gets resolved by that time too. Hey, the poll's looking quite interesting right now. Like the poll I've seen so far right now at this moment, 40% of people want a job where they can work from home, which for me is interesting because for me, I don't think I could work from home. It's just too boring. I got to get out. Unless I built a separate cafe in my home, right? If I built a separate cafe in my home, then it would simulate that experience of being there, right? And of course, it would be very therapeutic for me to be making my own coffee too. But that's one thing I was like, yeah, working from home is very difficult, but the vast majority of you guys want to work from home, 40%. And then 27% want to have a job that requires travel. And that's really interesting because for me, I don't want to travel anymore. I've traveled way too much. In Korea, I was telling some people here that I don't want to fly anymore. And they said, in Korean, they said to me like, oh, your stomach is full, which is a Korean expression to say that I've done too much traveling, that I'm sick of it. But my friends were like, man, I wish I could travel as much as you kind of thing, right? So, but I would say the most interesting one here is that only 8% of you guys want to do the 9-to-5 job. 8%. And personally, I think the majority of people are probably better off with that kind of job. Most people probably can't handle like personal responsibility to do things on their own. Like even statistically, I think the vast majority, like the number of, I think we have like 12 or 13% of people want to be entrepreneurs. And I think that statistic is way too high. I think that's kind of just what you think you want, but it's not really the best for you. I think the majority of you, I think the number's way too high. You're not going to be, I don't think most of you will be entrepreneurs. It's too hard and requires way too much suffering for most people to handle, right? So I would say that the 13% of us wanting to be entrepreneurs is probably way too high. And that 8% wanting to do traditional 9-to-5 job is way too low. It probably just is, maybe it's just the trend that people think that they want, but I think most people are probably better off doing that. I think. That's just my personal opinion. All right. Either way. Okay. So yeah. Interesting. A lot of different things to think about. You guys can write your comments below. We'd love to hear what you guys are thinking about this too. All right. So before we get into today's foundational figures, is very, very interesting. We're going to go over someone named William Tyndale. And you'll be like, oh, who is this foundational figure? But he is much more important than we think, and most people don't even know who William Tyndale is. All right, so before we get into that foundational figures word study, let's move into the first break of the day.
A slave until I came and set you free, took away your pain and suffering, and I parted your Red Sea. You said thank you, hallelujah, this is heaven here on earth. I will live my life rejoicing, giving glory forever. As time went on, your heart changed. Your joy is gone. That's why I say, don't forget the love you had at first, the stories of the past, the promises you made. You received in my domain of grace and love. Don't forget, though you're weaker and outnumbered, I give you the upper hand. Took you from a barren desert to your fertile promised land. You said thank you, hallelujah, you delivered me again. So I'll give my life to you and I will follow till the end. As time went on, your heart changed. Your joy is gone. That's why I say, of the past, the promises you made, my love. Don't forget the received in my domain of grace and love. Don't forget. Cherish it, value it before it's too late, and everything you received gets taken away. Then you'll see that 1,000 years out there, it's nothing like just one day with me. Don't forget the love you had at first, the stories of the past, the promises you made, my love. Don't forget the value of this time, the blessings you received in my domain of grace and love. Don't forget. Because 1,000 years out there, it's nothing like just one day with me.
All right, so let's get into today's word study. And once again, this Wednesday, we have the Foundational Figures word study. And today we're going to go over a very major figure in Christian history. His name is William Tyndale, right? And what is he known for? He is actually considered the father of the English Bible. Okay? So if you think about to yourself, like if you look at all the Bibles that you have, for most of us, most of us in Western countries, Bibles are easily accessible, and there are so many different translations of each. But the Bible in English, most of it is owed much to William Tyndale, and they sometimes call him the father of the English Bible. So if you look at the King James Version, 90% of the King James Version and 75% of the Revised Standard Version are from the translation of the Bible into English made by William Tyndale. And, interestingly enough, even though he's the father of the English Bible, he was actually burned at the stake for his work. I think it was what does it say here? October 6, 1536. Okay, so let's get into William Tyndale's life. Who is he and what he's done? Okay, so William Tyndale was born near the Welsh border of England in 1494, 40 years earlier, right? So 40 years before he was born, two important events occurred in Europe which would have a great impact on Tyndale's life and work. So in May of 1453, the Turks had stormed Constantinople, and the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire fell to the Muslim invaders. Now, Greek scholars fled westward and brought with them a scholarship that had been almost forgotten in the West. Greek language studies of the classics increased, and the scriptures began to be studied in the original Greek rather than the Latin Vulgate. Now, the second big invention was the printing press, or the big event was the printing press in 1454, and that was the second important development, right? So the printing press obviously would eliminate copyist errors and make the scriptures more easily available in quantity editions. But to have the Bible in English was illegal at that time. So in an attempt to restrain the influence of Wycliffe's followers, in 1408, Parliament passed the Constitution of Oxford, which forbade anyone from translating or reading a part of the Bible in the language of the people without the permission of the ecclesiastical authorities. Right? Sounds pretty bad, right? Men and women were even burnt for teaching their children the Apostles' Creed, the Lord's Prayer, and the Ten Commandments in English. So William Tyndale, however, had an unquenchable passion for making the Bible available to every Englishman. So in the 14th century, John Wycliffe was the first to make, or at least oversee, an English translation of the Bible. But that was before the invention of the printing press, and all copies had to be handwritten. And besides, the church banned the unauthorized translation of the Bible into English in 1408. Now, over 100 years later, Tyndale had a burning desire to make the Bible available to even the common people in England. After studying at Oxford and Cambridge, he joined the household of Sir John Walsh at Little Sudbury Manor as a tutor to the Walsh children. Now, Walsh was a generous lord of the manor and often entertained the local clergy at his table. Tyndale often added spice to the table conversation as he was confronted with the biblical ignorance of the priests. At one point, Tyndale told the priest, "If God spares my life and many years pass, I will cause a boy that drives the plow, and they will know more of the scripture than you do." Right? So, basically it was kind of like this vision he had. It was a nice dream, but how was Tyndale to accomplish this when translating the Bible to English was illegal? So he went to London to ask Bishop Tunstall if he could be authorized to make an English translation of the Bible, but the bishop would not grant his approval. However, Tyndale would not let the disapproval of men stop him from carrying out what seemed so obviously God's will. With the encouragement and support of some British merchants, he decided to go to Europe to complete his translation, then have it printed and smuggled back into England. So Tyndale went to the Bishop of London, Cuthbert Tunstall, to seek permission to translate the Bible into English. Tunstall refused, but while in London, Tyndale came into contact with several merchants smuggling some of Martin Luther's writings from Germany into England. They encouraged Tyndale to go to Europe to translate, and they would help smuggle the Bibles back into England. So in 1524, Tyndale goes to Germany. And in Hamburg, he worked on the New Testament, and in Cologne, he found a printer who would print the work. However, news of Tyndale's activity came to an opponent of the Reformation who had the press raided. Tyndale escaped with the printed pages and made his way to the German city of Worms, where the New Testament was soon published. 6,000 copies were printed and smuggled into England. The bishops did everything they could to eradicate the Bibles. But Bishop Tunstall had copies ceremoniously burned at St. Paul's, and the Archbishop of Canterbury bought up copies to destroy them. Tyndale used the money to print improved editions. So King Henry VIII, then basically he was divorcing Queen Catherine at that time, offered Tyndale a safe passage to England to serve as his writer and scholar. Tyndale refused, saying he would not return until the Bible could be legally translated into English. Tyndale continued hiding among the merchants in Antwerp and began translating the Old Testament while the king's agents searched all over England and Europe for him. Now, Tyndale fled England to translate the Bible on the continent, and even there, he had to be careful to avoid English spies and informers and European opponents of the Reformation. His whereabouts, it was difficult to determine, but he spent time in Hamburg, Wittenberg, Cologne, Worms, and Antwerp. And in 1525, his New Testament was printed and smuggled back into England. And it was the first translation of the Bible from the original Greek into English, which means, if it's Greek, it means only the New Testament. Indeed, it was the first translation of a Greek book into English. Now, what eventually happened is in 1534, Tyndale was betrayed by a false friend near Brussels, arrested by imperial forces, and thrown into prison. Tyndale was finally found by an Englishman who pretended to be his friend, but then turned him over to the authorities. After a year and a half in prison, he was brought to trial for heresy, for believing, among other things, in the forgiveness of sins and that the mercy offered in the gospel was enough for salvation, and he was accused of maintaining that faith alone justifies. In August 1536, he was condemned, and then on October 6th, he was strangled and his body burned at the stake. His last prayer was, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes," and the prayer was answered in part when 3 years later, in 1539, Henry VIII required every parish church in England to make a copy of the English Bible available to its parishioners. So, pretty incredible story. And you can easily see that, this was really God's will. And it's very, very interesting because, I am a very, very, I call myself the rebel pastor. And there's a lot of things that I won't listen to, right? Especially if it's something that's very necessary or proper, right? That's for the people, or something that we need to change, whatever it is. I'm someone who's like the rebel pastor, right? But when you look at all the biggest advancements, like even what we just heard right now, it requires a rebel. Someone to say no, right? And someone to just do. You know what I mean? Like, think about this. If I had to get permission to do this podcast 3.5 years ago, this would not have come out. They would have controlled all the content that would have came out of this podcast. But since this was done as a private thing, as my private podcast, what happens is I can say whatever I want. They can come to me and say, Pastor Sky, we would like you not to say this. And it's absolutely my choice and no one else. You know what I mean? So that was something that it's something that we have to understand is like Christianity and all of God's providence has been built by rebels. Don't you think? Like they rebelled. Moses rebelled against the Egyptian Pharaoh, and he even rebelled against his own people that didn't want him to do that anymore. Like didn't want him to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let his people go, right? Look at, the wrong rebel was Jonah. When God said, do this, he rebelled the other way, right? There's so many things when we look at, they're like, wait a second. We have been, the history of God has required us to be rebels. Look at even us right now. We are rebels to society. People are against us, against providence. And yet we're rebels right now. And this is why we're able to move forward and do even more in this history right now too. We rebel by having protests. We rebel by having these petitions. We rebel by continuously spreading the gospel. Even though Netflix, all these things came out, we're rebelling, right? The status quo, there are people trying to maintain the status quo in this world, but we're not doing it. God requires all of us not to be rebellious to God, but be rebellious to the world and be obedient to God, right? And that's, that's what it requires. It requires us to be obedient to God, which also means we become rebels to the world. And I thought it was very, very interesting just looking at this William Tyndale story that it cost him his life to make a Bible ready for the people to read. I thought that was incredible to see that. So I don't know about you guys, but that's what I was thinking. I was like, nah, this is amazing kind of thing. So that is something that I was looking at, and like I thought it was quite powerful listening to this story too. So William Tyndale, guys, remember that, the father of the English Bible. And if you guys, there's a couple crazy things about William Tyndale though. I think he spoke 7 languages fluently, from like Latin, Greek, Hebrew, English, Spanish. Like he spoke 7 different languages, and especially Greek and Hebrew, he spoke fluently, and this is why he was able to do those things. So I thought it was quite cool, like just to see how God raises these people, and they're able to make history by doing something going against his own church that kind of rebelled against God, right? So I think that's something that I thought it was a very, very interesting story. I hope you guys really enjoyed William Tyndale. We're going to go into more. There's so many figures we still need to get into. I do want to go into some other people that are talked about. I've talked about already, but we'll get into it a little bit later. Okay, so there it is, guys. That's today's word study on foundational figures of Christianity, and that was William Tyndale, the father of the English Bible. All right, so before we get into Health is Happiness, we have a brand new episode today. I hope you guys will enjoy this too, but let's get into our our second break of the day. Okay, so let's get into our final segment for today on this Wednesday podcast. And every Wednesday we do have Health is Happiness. Brand new episode just came out, and it looks like Yen Yu from Singapore is doing this amazing series on injuries. And I think this is something that's very important for us because a lot of times we get injured, and for me as a guy, like we just try to walk things off and just pretend it's not really hurt, and we don't go to the hospital. We don't take care of ourselves really well. Last week, what was it last week? It was about soft tissue injuries. And this week, we're going to go into lower back pain in this series about injuries. I do believe there's like one more episode on injuries, and then Yuan Yu will also go into preventing injuries. I believe is it prevention of injuries? Let me just check right here. Preventing injuries. So this is really cool. 3 episodes on the different types of injuries that everyone goes through, and then we're gonna have 3 episodes on how to prevent these injuries and stuff like that. So I think this is gonna be awesome. Okay, so everyone, let's please welcome all the way from Singapore, studying physiotherapy. This is Yen Yu with Health is Happiness.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuan Yu and I'm from Singapore. I'm currently finishing up my studies in physiotherapy. On today's topic, I'll share more about low back pain. I'd like to give thanks to the Holy Trinity for this opportunity, as well as Julius and Pastor Sky for this platform. Firstly, what? There are different definitions of low back pain depending on the source. According to the European guidelines, it refers to low back pain or lumbar back pain, which is pain and discomfort localized in the area of the back that starts below our rib cage, with or without leg pain. For the anatomy, our lower back consists of the lumbar spine, which is between the end of our rib cage all the way to the top of our hip bone. In between each spinal segment, which is also known as a vertebra, there are small discs which act as shock absorbers to absorb and support our body's weight. Surrounding these spinal segments are ligaments and muscles which support our body's weight too. For the prevalence of low back pain, this group of conditions known as musculoskeletal conditions, it refers to conditions that relate to the performance of our movement, and it comprises things like muscles, bones, joints, and adjacent soft connective tissues. So within this field of musculoskeletal conditions, low back pain is the leading cause of disability in majority of countries. Disability refers to anything that affects your daily life. Low back pain also affects nearly 60 to 80% of people throughout their lifetime. And although low back pain can be quite debilitating and painful, in approximately 90% of cases, it is temporary and the pain can improve without surgery. However, 50% of people who suffer from an episode of low back pain will have recurrent episodes within a year. Moving on to the types. There's a few ways to categorize. One way is the duration of the back pain. So it can be categorized into acute, subacute, and chronic low back pain. Acute low back pain is an episode of low back pain that lasts for less than 6 weeks. Subacute is an episode between 6 to 12 weeks, and chronic is an episode of 12 weeks and more. Another way of categorizing is according to which structures are being involved. For instance, muscles being strained can be involved. Disc being affected can be involved. There can be ligaments, and the vertebrae bodies itself can be involved. But in order to diagnose it to this extent, you will need to see a doctor or a general practitioner to get it diagnosed. And it may require diagnostic tools such as an X-ray. Moving on to the causes, low back pain can be caused by a few things. One thing can be due to trauma, an accident, a fall, a sports injury. It can also be due to something a bit more over time, something more gradual. For instance, you carried something too heavy or you moved your back too much over a period of time. And also there are more serious pathology due to things like arthritis, cancer, infection, etc., which I'll delve on a bit more later. And some risk factors for low back pain include being overweight and being sedentary. This is because if you weigh a bit more, then your structures of your body have to support more weight and are under more stress. And if you're a bit more sedentary, you don't really exercise, then generally speaking, the structures in your body, like your muscles and your ligaments, aren't that strong to support your body's weight. Moving on to the symptoms. Symptoms can range from a dull ache to a stabbing or shooting sensation. And for serious conditions, they account for 1 to 2% of people with low back pain, and about 5 to 10% present with conditions that link to neurological involvement, which means the nerves are involved. Okay, so what this means is that for a small percentage of people who have serious pathology, some symptoms to look out for are, for instance, having back pain with bowel or bladder control problems, having back pain with a loss of sensation in your groin area or in other areas, having diffuse weakness in your arms or your legs, or having a fever. So if you have any of these symptoms, that is considered a red flag, and you should definitely seek healthcare professional advice. And another condition that you should likely seek medical advice is if you had back pain after a fall or an injury or a traumatic incident. And with regards to nerve involvement, if there are any pain, numbness, pins and needles that run from your buttocks down to your leg, then this likely highlights that there are some structures in your back that are compressing or they're irritating the nerves. So this could be one of the major nerves which run down your leg called the sciatic nerve. That's why there's this condition called sciatica. Or it could also be other nerves such as the nerves closer to your spine area, which are known as spinal nerve roots. Hence, if any of these nerves are involved, then you're likely to get more nerve-related symptoms such as numbness and pins and needles or pain that run down from your buttocks to your leg. Okay, secondly, I'll talk a bit about treatment. Irregardless if it's a serious or not serious cause of back pain, it is always good to self-monitor. Self-monitor the location, the onset of the pain. When did it start? Was it after a certain incident? Was it after that you did something out of the norm, right? And monitor the pattern. Is it only aggravated on movement? Is it constant throughout the day? Is there no pattern to it? And also monitor what are the aggravating and easing factors, meaning what makes it worse and what makes it better. If it is not of a serious pathology, it will likely get better on its own in 4 to 6 weeks. Management for such cases of low back pain without serious pathology include self-management with non-pharmacological methods. This includes education and exercise. Education refers to what we spoke about earlier on, which includes the different causes, the symptoms of low back pain. And for exercise, I can delve a bit more into that. In the initial stages, if let's say it's very painful, moderately to severely painful, you can also use a heat pack to reduce the pain in the short term. Guidelines promote the avoidance of bed rest or complete rest, and they recommend a continuation of activities, your usual daily activities, as tolerated. One way to know how much you should do and how much you should rest is this traffic light analogy. If let's say pain score 0 to 10, right? 10 being very painful, 0 being not painful. If let's say the pain you rate it about a 0 to 3 out of 10, then it is like a green light. You can continue doing what you need to do within that tolerable mild pain. But if the pain increases to 4 to 6 out of 10, that is like an orange light. You probably want to do a little bit less. You probably want to rest a little bit more for now. And if it's 7 to 10 out of 10, then that is a red light. You probably should take a rest first before continuing with your activity. And if it's that painful, then I think it would be better to seek medical advice too. So one can try with the above, being able to continue with your activities as tolerated and exercise, and review the progress in about 1 to 2 weeks. When to see a doctor, especially if you had a traumatic incident, like an accident, a fall, a sports injury, or if it worsens over time. If let's say you did what you could do within that 1 to 2 weeks, but it worsens over that period of time, then yes. Or if you have any neurological nerve-related symptoms like numbness and pins and needles or any of the red flags, then you should see a doctor. Okay, and if your low back pain persists for more than 12 weeks, which is more chronic back pain, exercise is still recommended as the first line of treatment and should also be considered as something routine, something that you should do more so in the long term to manage the back pain. But what is also recommended is more gradual exercise, because chronic back pain likely means that it might be a bit more painful. You had it for a longer period of time. So you probably want to ease into activity, ease into exercise a bit more slowly. For some exercises that you can do, there are many online if you search, but I'll highlight the key ones. If let's say you're in a lot of pain, then some easier ones that you can do are knee rolls, where you bend your knees, you're lying down, and you roll your knees from side to side, which is rotating your trunk, your torso. Others include knee to chest, bringing your knee to your chest and bending your back in that manner. A gentle cobra stretch, where you move your back backwards, or even standing up and bending down to reach your toes, bending backwards to reach your back, or bending to the side. Other exercises that are a bit more advanced include the cat-cow, pelvic tilt, cobra stretch, and some strengthening exercises for the core include things like crunches, dead bug. Yes, you can go and search up how to do it. It's a really good exercise. And for the back, to strengthen the back, include back extensions, also known as Superman. Then for cardio exercise, which also helps with back pain, you can do things as simple as walking, all the way to jogging, swimming, etc. For other methods of treatment, such as acupuncture, there's limited evidence to show that it's effective for low back pain at the moment. And for medication, if you would like to get over-the-counter pain reliefs, things like NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are better, muscle relaxants, but paracetamol is not recommended as seen in research. And for things such as injection and surgery, doctors will only consider that if conservative treatment fails. Okay, last but not least, I'll delve a little bit more on prevention, how to prevent back pain. When you're carrying heavy things, it is good if you can use something that distributes the weight across both shoulders, like a backpack, as compared to using like a tote bag or a duffel bag, which only puts weight on one of the shoulders. Or you can even use like a wheeled trolley or suitcase to carry those heavier weights. And with regards to carrying posture, if let's say you want to carry something very heavy from the ground to like waist level or onto a higher surface, then it's better to squat, take the object, and then lift it up, as compared to keeping your legs fairly straight and then bending your entire back down to carry it. Then also you can avoid prolonged posture, meaning that if you're sitting down and you tend to, for instance, slouch, then every 30 minutes to 90 minutes do get up, stretch around, or do change your posture, sit more upright, lean against your chair. Okay. Thirdly, you can also do, I'm on the fourth point. Fourth, you can also do strengthening exercises such as core and back exercises, which we mentioned earlier on. And fifth, things like lumbar support, ergonomic adjustments can help, but fundamentally, the above ways are more superior. Okay, with that, we've come to the end of this episode. I hope it wasn't too dry and it helped you to understand a bit more about low back pain and what we can do to prevent it or to treat it if we're having any low back pain. With that, I've come to the end of the episode. Any questions, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. And take care, everyone. Let's continue to keep up the good work and taking care of ourselves physically, mentally, and spiritually. Goodbye.
And thank you so much, Yin Yu, for another wonderful episode of Health is Happiness. And I think this is a very important one with lower back injuries. And I liked what she said at the very end about having, like the support for your back when you're sitting down and adjusting the seating so it's proper, right? And I'm like, even right now, like I can already feel my lower back a little bit sore, as I record this podcast too. So it reminds me, it makes me think about how I can even sit better so that I don't have to go through these injuries also, okay? Either way, super grateful and thankful. Please leave a comment below. Yin Yu is doing such an amazing job. I can't even pronounce her name the way that she pronounces it because it's like Chinese, but it's like she's like Yin Yu. I don't know how to do it, but of course she can do it perfectly. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this Wednesday podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday message and service tonight, and we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when